Tuia ki te rangi, tuia ki te whenua, tuia ki te re tangata, tau mai te mauri o te manawa ora, hei arahi a tātou, hui te marama, hui te ora, haumi e, hui e, pai ki e. Along my journey in Te Ao Māori, I had this thought come up around if horses had have been here pre-colonisation, would have our tupuna, our ancestors, trained them in the same ways that we see it being done today? Oftentimes I observe horses being trained in ways that are about dominance, control and force, and I can't help but think and be curious about whether this is a symptom of colonisation and how could we go about decolonising our work with horses and indigenising these practices. So that question, that pātai, led me on this journey about discovering the connection between tangata, taiao, the environment, the whenua, the flows and the natural rhythms of everything, and of course our hoiho, our horses, and that symbiotic relationship, and how if we learn from our indigenous wisdom, how can that guide us forth in healing that symbiotic relationship? If that sounds like something that you would be interested in exploring as well, then no mai haere mai, welcome to Rongoā, the podcast, where we explore healing through indigenous wisdom. So ko waio, who am I? I remember, a few years ago now, when I was at a wānanga at the very beginning of my journey into Te Ao Māori and reconnection to my culture, I was asked this pātai, this question, along with the rest of probably around 80 wahine in the room. And I can remember as it went around the room and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I can't answer this question. And in that moment, I thought to myself, I'm not going to send my mum a message and ask for my pepeha, because that felt like I was being inauthentic to myself at that moment of my journey. So instead, when it finally came around to me, I stood up with a shaky voice and tears in my eyes, and I said, I don't actually know my pepeha very well. What I do know is I come from this area, aroundabouts, and this area, but that was about all I knew. And that was one moment early on in my journey that had some pain around it, but that pain also meant for me a moment of determination that I wasn't going to let that be my story any longer. It wasn't going to be the story of my children and my grandchildren. So today, I can sit here, and I'm still learning it, but I can sit here and I can talk about where I come from and who I am. So, to begin, ko waio, he uri tēnei no ngā tirangitihi, te atu haunui a paparangi, Ngāti whare, Ngāti manawa, ka hununu ki Wairarapa, rangi tāne ki Wairarapa, Ngāti toa, Raukawa, me tu whare toa. And I'm so excited and grateful to be here and be able to explore this kaupapa rongoā, healing through indigenous wisdom. So where did my riding career, life, passion, hobby begin. So I think horses was always in my blood. But I fell in love with horses on the back of my nana and granddad's whānau / pig hunting horse when I was just a little girl. So I spent many summers, many school holidays riding Big Ben up and down the road in Kawerau, through the watermelon fields, often with just a Hessian sack for a saddle, and up into the forestry. And by the time I was 6, I had convinced my mum and dad, through getting good reading grades, that I really, really wanted riding lessons. And so I was very privileged to begin that journey of riding lessons and pony club, and later competing in pony club and show jumping, and then dressage. And in my late teens and early 20s, I discovered that I really enjoyed working with young horses, and I guess what is often classed as problem horses, but we know better than that now. And so in my early 20s, I had a beautiful young mare called Stella come into my life. She was a warm blood, and she had had the start to life where she had truly been broken in. Her soul had been broken. And when I met her, she had had things done to her, like having her ears twisted. She was bony, skinny and bony, and the old chap that had bred her had kept her on minimal grass so that she was easier to train. So my heart felt for her, and she came home with me. And I sort of winged it with what I had learned along the journey, and I think things that came in innate to me. And I had always been like pretty empathetic and had a more of a gentle way of working with horses. However, one day I had got to a point, because you couldn't touch her ears or up the top of her neck, and I'd spent so much time working with her and getting her comfortable with being touched and having the bridle on. And this one day she just threw her head into the air and threw the bridle off, and I was frustrated, and in that moment I punched her in the neck. And I can just remember, like, in an instant, I felt awful for what I had done. And I looked at her eyes, and I swear she had tears in her eyes. And dramatic, I know, but I dropped to my knees and just started sobbing. And I was like, please send me a way of helping her. Because what I have, the knowledge that I have, is I'm not able to help her as much as I would like to. So it would have been like within the month, I had seen, and at that time, Equidays. It was the very first Equidays, and I saw a post pop up for Dr. Andrew McLean, and he was going to be coming to Aotearoa to teach there, and he was looking for a problem horse to work with. And I thought, oh my gosh, this sounds exactly like my horse. And so I sent them an email, and they sent one back saying, yep, you're accepted. And so at Equidays, that was just so eye-opening. It was the first time I had seen ways of working with horses that was learning about how to work with them in a way that they think and learn, instead of just coming from a place of, like I had been taught through, I guess, and I don't want to say all of it, but like the traditional way where it was predominantly about force and control and managing them and having them do what you want them to do. So that was just so eye-opening and life-changing. Then it was kind of one of those things that just like one thing snowballed after the next. And fast forward a few months, I had come across Buck and his documentary. And when I watched that, I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to meet this man. And as the universe would have it, a couple of weeks later, well, in 2 weeks' time, he was going to be here in Aotearoa on his biannual trip, his clinic here. And even better, it was only an hour away from where I lived. So you can bet I was there all 3 days taking notes on everything. I'm pretty sure I still have that notebook somewhere as well. And by the end of the clinic, I was just in awe of what they could do, what he could do with horses. And I built up the courage and went up to him and I said, I want to be like you one day when I grow up. What do I have to do? And he said to me, he kind of chuckled, and he said, find good mentors, but be careful who you listen to, and work with as many different horses as you can. So first of all, I found the horses to work with. I volunteered at a local trekking place. They had over 90 horses. So I thought, well, sweet, I can check that box. And what an amazing opportunity to just work with many different types of horses and start applying some of these skills that I had learned through watching his documentary, learned through watching his clinic, and then I went on to buy his DVDs as well. So I would work with these horses and I would video myself, and then I would watch them back and see what I did well, what I could have done better, and I just learned and grew from there. And fast forward, my gosh, many years now, I went on to have an amazing career working with young horses, starting young horses, working with horses that had issues coming up for them that I learnt was a reflection of their environments. They weren't problem horses, they didn't have bad behaviour, but their environments were creating contexts where they couldn't not but be in a place of survival, which is where we start to see things like freeze and flight and fight coming out, and all of those habits and behaviours that we label as bad. So anyway, obviously I'm passionate about that and could go on a whole rant and tangent. No, I don't want to say rant, but we could definitely do a whole podcast on that, which we probably will at some stage. So yeah, what an amazing career. Just those things of following your heart and your intuition, and now I would call it being tupuna led. So fast forward, after working with horses and teaching and in 2021, and of course I must say many amazing human mentors and horse mentors that have really shaped my life and the way that I do things. But in 2021, I came across a podcast with one of my mentors, Warwick Schiller, and Rupert Isaacson. And Rupert was sharing around his journey with indigenous peoples, both through where he whakapapas with the Kalahari Bush people and his work in the jungle with different indigenous tribes, and then through into his journey with his son into the Mongolian mountains working with the shamans. And as he talked about the things that they experienced, including shape-shifting, which blew my mind, especially, being a Māori girl and hearing about Maui and his shape-shifting growing up, I thought, I need to know more about this. But first, I felt like, if I dived into other cultures, that it could potentially be misappropriation, and I wanted to explore my own culture. But it brought about this thought of like, why don't I actually even know about my own culture and our healing in Te Ao Māori? And at the time, I was in a really unhealthy relationship. And when I did a Google to try and see what I could find, nothing really came up. And so I kind of just parked it. And now looking back, I can see that it was one of those things that was just like divinely timed. And I think because I wasn't in a healthy place, I wouldn't have been able to receive that well and safely. So fast forward 10 months, I was now out of this relationship and in a healthy, safe environment. And I ended up reconnecting with a beautiful old friend of mine, and I was telling him about this podcast and my curiosity around it. And he said to me, oh, well, part of that is to do with the Tohunga Suppression Act. And I won't get into that in this podcast. We will do later on down the track. But along with that, it brought about this great sense of grief and heartbreak, but also a realization and this thought of like, okay, well, maybe all of this around our history as Māori has got to do with why I'm disconnected from our culture. And so in that moment of heartbreak, it also flung open the door of like this passion and this fire inside my puku to reconnect to our culture, to remember and reclaim, and what an amazing journey that has taken me on. So I guess that's what has led me here today over the last 4 years, 4 years now, going on this amazing journey of Te Reo Māori, of our whakapapa, and all of these beautiful little things that just keep getting woven into the journey along the way as I meet different people and they bring in their things, whether it's tikanga or rongoā rākau or kapahaka or karanga, and it just keeps expanding this kete. At the moment, I'm looking down at the harakeke on the floor, and another beautiful piece of this weaving journey, receiving my moko kauai, reclaiming my Māori name, just incredible things that have had such a massive impact on not only myself and my own healing journey. I could not have even imagined this. Through the process, after leaving the relationship, I embarked on the journey of therapy in a traditional sense, which has been amazing. But above anything and everything, this journey of reclamation has been the most healing and brought about this sense of belonging. And I think that's had an amazing ripple effect out to my whānau and with my horses as well. So early on, I had this thought around what would it look like to decolonize my life and how I show up with the horses. And so in the early days, that was simply around a karakia, which we're going to get into in one of our next episodes. But it just triggered this thought of, as I'm learning things along my journey, how can I integrate that into working with the horses? And it has just been so beautiful to see how that has impacted them. Little things like, little big things. At one kapahaka event with Ngāti Whakaue, after they won Te Matitini, I saw some beautiful earrings at a stall, so I was like drawn over there, and I got chatting to the lady who owned it. And Blazing Laser was the name of the Pākehī. And she was telling me about what they do. I was telling her about what I do and the healing mahi with the horses and the mind body work, and she was like, I think you would love this. And so she brought out this tonga puoro, and this was the first time I had heard that name, tonga puoro. And this instrument was the porotiti, and she explained how it was an instrument for the sound of it. It was also a children's toy, and it had been used and is used as rongoā, as a healing tool, specifically for joint pain and for respiratory issues. And so she gifted me this porotiti, and I went away and sat out with my horses and learned to play it. And in the beginning, I really struggled to get it going. And I learnt that I had to let go of my agenda and this like determination to like force it to get going, and kind of just be with the practice of it. And as I was doing it, Chrome was with me, and he came and stood with me, and as I started to get it going, his head lowered, his nose started to drip, and then he started clearing his nose through sneezing, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what she just told me it was for. So things like that, learning karanga recently, and then playing with that, practicing it with the horses, and seeing just phenomenal responses to the karanga. Chrome having these big releases, and Gaucho lying out flat on the ground, and you can like, I was so lucky to capture that on video, and you can just like feel this moment where it's like this energy kind of like bursts out, and both of them are hit with it. We're all hit with it at the same time. And then looking at like things like karakia and introducing that into, as I said earlier, with my friend helping me and writing this one for me that I could use in my workspaces, but also with doing it when I'm out with the horses as well. But I feel like I'm still at the very beginning of my journey, although looking back, my life looks nothing like it did 4 years ago. Oh my gosh, I forgot to talk about we'll talk about this properly in another episode, but in the beginning I thought I'll start out with learning our language, but pretty quickly I realized that learning a language is not something you do overnight or just in the space of a couple of months, and that was going to be a lifelong journey. But what I was so lucky to have had was my mama, who is Pākehā of European descent. She had done a lot of work in our researching our whakapapa and documenting it, and having talked to my nana and other whānau members. And so she had all of this sitting here ready and waiting for one day when one of us was ready to look at that. So when I learned about our kraua, our great-great-grandfather, that he had survived the Tarawera eruption by riding away at just 13 years old on his horse 2 days before the eruption. I believe that his mama had told him to ride away along with his uncle. Their kainga, their home, was at the base of Rongoā here at a place called Waiariki, and that was lost during the eruption. So along with his mama, his siblings, his grandmother, his kuia, and other whānau members. And so when I learned about his story, it kind of brought these names on a piece of paper to life for me. And along with going, okay, maybe that's where my love of horses came from. Maybe that's why I get this feeling of, when things just come to me and I think to myself, where did I get that from? Where did I learn that? Feels like I've done it before. And I think, that's where it came from. But it also just like, it dropped in this thought, which now I think that's a tupuna guided thing, around retracing his footstep, his path as he escaped the eruption from Rotomahana all the way to Matata, to our marae, Ngāti Rangitihi, or our iwi, our marae rangitihi. And so that took me on this phenomenal journey of reconnection to land, to people, to whanaunga that I had never met before, back to our marae that I'd never been to before. And, you know, on that very first day, turning up there, not knowing anybody, and introducing myself along with my papa, and to now where I can go there and jump on the tea towels in the kitchen, which is always a good place to start, and, you know people by name, and, you know, they're just whānau now, which has brought about this great sense of belonging and healing in itself. So yeah, that brings me through to our podcast today. And just that realization that there's so much to learn, and I would love to be able to share this journey with other people who also have this longing, because I think so many of us are longing for something deeper than, I feel like many of us have been on this path of learning like the skills of horsemanship and all of those sorts of things, but there's this deeper level of longing and connection to where we come from, to ko wai o, who am I, ko wai koe, who are you, our whakapapa, and the realm of wairua, the unseen energy. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to different people, both tangata huiho, horse people, as well as experts in te ao Māori, as we explore and learn from mātauranga, from our wisdom, from our indigenous culture, te ao Māori. And how can we bring those things across into not only our lives, our everyday lives, but that with horses as well. Because as I've learned along this journey, when the whenua is well, when the wai, the water is well, the land and the water, that will mean that our horses are well and we are well. So why the name Rongoā? Well, to me, this is a little bit of an ode to the very beginning, that pātai, that question around what does healing look like in my own culture. And of course, the Māori kupu for healing is rongoā. And this can come, as I've learned, in many different forms. One thing for me has just been a connection to my culture, to te ao Māori. But of course, we have it in practical ways as well, like rongoā rākau, which is the use of our medicinal plants, can come in the form of music and waiata and movement. It can come in the form of our language, te reo Māori. So in this first series, we're going to be exploring te ao Māori, and then the hope is that we will explore other indigenous cultures from there. Because we're all indigenous to somewhere. This isn't about othering. This is about looking at we're all indigenous to somewhere. Tūpapa tuanuku, our Earth Mother. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to get to know you all. So feel free to send us a message. Tell us about what you're doing in your life. Maybe you've got some things to learn. Just like with horses, I never feel like I'm a horse trainer. I feel like I'm a student of the horse. So I'm a student here. So please share with us. Make sure that you follow along, subscribe, follow the socials, all those good things. Share it out to your whānau and friends. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Okay, let's just finish out with a beautiful breath and our karakia. Hā ki roto. Hā ki waho. Mā te hau mahana o te kāhui o te rangi, me ngā wairua o ngā tupuna, tātou e tiaki, tātou e manaki, i ngā wā katoa. Tihei Mauri ora.